I guess we are live.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Salman Iqbal and I'm joined with Tennis. And today we are going to be talking about business scalability. Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome Tennis. Tennis, how are you doing this morning
Very
or
good, sir.
evening?
Very good. My name is Tennis. Yeah, that's my real name. And Simon, how long you been in the business now?
Beginning of this year, so 9 months.
9 months. Okay. Well, this is my 42nd year in the business.
Okay. When you talk about business, yeah. So I've been with Appia for 9 months, but I have been in the business for about 8 years.
Okay. So we've both been around for a while. So anyway, Simon and I work together, and so this is the context that we're pursuing here is just two professionals talking, and that's really the arrangement we have today.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, all we're going to be talking about is scalability in your business and how it relates to technology. And while we're talking, please feel free to click around and submit your questions. You'll see a panel on your right, I believe, where you can submit your questions anytime you have your questions. Let us know. What we discussed today. We have a blog to go with it that touches upon the discussions that we're going to have. So we'll be sharing that with you. And yeah, also please submit any other feedback, anything else you'd like to hear about after this, any other topics that you want. We can pull it in on our expertise. It's not just Tennis and myself. We have a whole bunch of people who help us do this. So well, maybe we should do our intros. Tennis, would you like to go first and introduce yourself? Give us a bit more about you, who you are, where you're from. Tell us about your swords behind you, everything.
Oh yes, I do martial arts, and those are swords. Those are real swords. I've been in the business, as I said, 42 years. This is my 42nd year. Done everything as far as working in IT. I've run cables. I've installed things. I've traveled to customer sites to teach classes. I've been a developer, and lately was a DevOps guy. So been there and done that. I can honestly say for most areas of the IT world.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tennis. And yeah, my name is Salman Iqbal. I don't do any martial arts, unfortunately, so I would not be messing with tennis anytime soon. Yeah, I am based in the UK, in Wales. I have been working in IT for about 8-9 years. So I've worked in aerospace, finance, banking, government, you name it. And I started my life as a developer. Then I got into DevOps, cloud DevOps, and currently I work as an MLOps engineer. So all about taking your machine learning and data science workloads and running them in the cloud efficiently and at scale. So that's what I do. Scale is the word of today. Yeah. Isn't that right, Tennis?
Yes, sir. And I'll, with that, segue into talking about one thing that we're going to make real clear about scalability is that there isn't any question, and we're talking about scalability and the cloud. There isn't any question that technical scalability, traffic scalability is achievable and well understood, and there is no issue with all the providers being able to handle your traffic volumes. That's not the scalability we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about a different tack on that same subject, which is scaling your organization, which is something that people don't talk about an awful lot. Is now that I've got this wonderful environment on, for example, AWS, and pretty soon everybody wants to use it, how do I scale my organization to handle it? And that's really the context of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, perfect. So we work for Appvia, and Appvia work with lots of organizations. We help other organizations scale up their business from technology point of view and from business point of view. So you can check us out on appvia.io. We've got lots of solutions. We've got lots of bright people. And what we do is we help other organizations adapt cloud native technologies and accelerate their software development and delivery. And that's the point, right? We want to get the product in front of your users. Yeah. And how do you do that? Is by accelerating your development and scaling your business. And I guess that is exactly what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Go on, tell us a bit more. Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, the classic scenario is, hopefully this scenario is, that you make a sojourn into the cloud, and you bring up, for example, Kubernetes, and you use one of the pre-configured Kubernetes offerings from the cloud providers like AKS for Azure or EKS for AWS. And you bring it up and it works fine, and you find that everything is as advertised. And then you continue on, and a couple months go by and you're a little more successful and more people are interested. And somebody says, well, can I have a cluster too? And they say, yeah, sure. And before you know it, you've got to maintain lots of different clusters, even within the context of these EKS, AKS offerings. That's a great deal of effort. And as Salman will tell you, that's not something that's easily done in terms of the number of people that are going to be involved. So what happens is you, over time, find yourself at least tempted to throw bodies at this problem, so that you have more and more people that are going to be maintaining it. Does that make sense, Salman?
So I think what you're saying, if I understood this correctly,
Sure.
is we are an organization, and we are in this process of acceleration, and we're developing our products, and we've got all these users. Let's call them developers or support people or whatever they are, and they need to use the resources. That could be Kubernetes clusters, could be virtual machines, could be anything, right? Could be anything. And they come in, they sign up, and they say, all right, I want a cluster. Let's go with Kubernetes cluster, because that's the hot thing right now, right?
Yeah.
I want to sign up. I want a cluster. I guess they raise a ticket. Somebody creates them a cluster. Somebody else joins the company. You start creating clusters. So basically, we've got tons of tickets now. People trying to create clusters for as and when people get onboarded. It's not just, I'm guessing, it's not just creating clusters, right? It's like, what permissions do you have?
Exactly.
What kind of roles? Is that right, Dennis?
Exactly. Yeah. What you find is that what people most of the time do is they retrofit existing ticketing processes into this new arena.
Okay.
And then they say, well, just submit a ticket and we'll fire up a new cluster for you. And what you find over time is that it gets harder and harder to keep up with those tickets, because again, we're assuming you're being successful. And if you are successful, you are going to have more need for these facilities on the cloud. And that success breeds a real interesting problem where you simply can't keep up with the requests that keep coming in. And that's where things tend to go off the rails, because the temptation is, that's okay, I'll just hire another administrator, because after all I'm doing is I'm bringing up a cluster by hand. So that's the temptation. That's what not to do.
Okay. So basically, if I were to summarize the discussions we've had, we're an organization, and we can handle all the technical stuff, as in we can handle the traffic that's coming onto our websites. And, the cloud provider, as you're saying, has provided us the answer. We've got load balancers, we've got clusters that are running in, people who've got the right permissions. But one aspect that we don't think about is scalability of the organization.
That's right.
And how to handle the success in the cloud. That's what you're saying, right?
That's right. You can be a victim of your own success. And the temptation is, that's okay, I will just hire. What'll happen is that you will get complaints. My people need a cluster, and you told us last week you'd have it, and it still isn't there. What's the problem? That's okay, I'll get another couple of administrators, or I'll retrain somebody who's already in the organization to be an administrator, because all you have to do, quote unquote, is stand up a cluster. And you find that is a much bigger effort as time goes on, because you will have particular needs that people will, I need these permissions, and I need a cluster that looks like this, and those kinds of things. And no, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's correct. Because when we say give me a cluster, you need to create everything that goes around it, right? All the networking, all the security, all the resources of like, where my image is going to get stored, what are the permissions, what application can talk to what application.
That's right.
And that, you're saying, doing it manually is a painful process. And I've done that in the past, and I 100% know every time I do it, I can never do it the same I did it the first time around.
That's
things, right?
And that's an excellent point. Even if you mandate, we're going to build our clusters with these guidelines always and forever. Our namespaces are going to be named this, and the way they're going to work is that. And what will tend to happen is the proliferation of manual guidelines and cheat sheets that will outline how you're supposed to do this. And
Okay.
Salman, I don't know about you, but I've never been able to create two separate clusters that are identical, truly identical. And it's not the failing of the technology so much as it's just the complexity of the technology we're talking about. So what happens is that again, you start to add people to this process, and then you add guidelines for those people to follow. And then mistakes start happening. You know, you told me last week you were going to bring up a new cluster for me. You did, but how come the namespace is named foo? You know, those kinds of things. And
What,
doesn't
everybody have a food namespace?
Exactly. You know, it worked for me in development, right? I mean, it's in the classic developer's line. Well, it worked for me on my machine.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing you saying is, like, how not to solve a problem is not to keep doing what perhaps you were doing before, as in what was working before maybe manually might not work anymore. And you're saying if you keep throwing bodies at this problem, you're spending more money, but you're not getting where you wanted to, want to get to, right?
Exactly. And ultimately it's a losing proposition. You are trying to surf on this giant wave of requirements that people are on. And that is an extremely dangerous place to be, because ultimately you can't keep ahead of it. Now we've talked about, this is the anti-pattern. The pattern should be to go and try to find ways to automate this effort and have your people spend time on the automation. By the way, one thing I haven't talked about too is that if you hire a bunch of intelligent, highly trained individuals to sit around and do repetitious things day in and day out, they won't stay very long. That's another problem, that you are guaranteeing high turnover with, and people say, well, it's just bringing up a cluster. Well, just bringing up a cluster is a pretty complicated thing. So if you turn it into a repetitious effort, then nobody's going to stay. And then people say, well, why don't you just do it with something like Terraform, which you can do. But we'll get into that in just a moment. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No. Well, it's an exciting talk. It's an exciting discussion. So, welcome everyone, people who've joined us while we were talking. Welcome to the webinar. We are talking about business scalability. Once you start using your technology the way you want it to in the cloud, you come at, I'm going to call it crossroads, right? Can we call it a crossroad?
Yeah, that's a good.
You come at crossroads, and as Tennis was explaining, technically everything's working fine, but the problem is you've got all these users, as in your developers, who are building these services. You need to onboard them onto your system, and you need to provide them the resources they need. And if you were doing this manually beforehand, it won't work anymore. Is that a good summary there?
That's a good summary. Yeah.
Good summary. And if you have any questions, please feel free to pop your questions into the chat, and we will answer them. We've got so Tennis so far has talked about how not to do, how not to solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
Tennis. All I hear is I give you some solutions, Tennis, and I'm sure people want to hear some solutions. Like what do we do in this case? We shouldn't throw bodies at it because we'll waste money.
Yeah.
And people will leave, as you say, and I completely agree with that. So what should we do, Tennis?
Well, the in one word, it's automation. But even then, you have to be careful. The initial inclination would be say, well, I'll just write a bunch of Terraform scripts. Nothing wrong with that. It'll work just fine. Problem is, you now have to maintain those Terraform scripts. Okay. And that's something that people don't realize that you're getting into is not every engineer is going to be a developer, but you're requiring them to be a developer in order to build and maintain Terraform scripts.
Okay.
Again, nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just that you have basically a priesthood that looks after Kubernetes, and then you have a new priesthood that looks after the Kubernetes scripts.
Okay.
And again, if that's what you're signing up for and you realize it, that's fine. But the long-term implication is that you will have these Terraform scripts, and the scripts are going to tend to vary depending on the provider. So you'll have AWS scripts, and you'll have Azure scripts, and you'll have GCP scripts. and you will have probably multiple variations on each. So before
Yeah.
you know it, you have a large library of scripts that need to be, one hopes, documented and maintained.
Yep.
And the organization needs to realize that is a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
So that's what I would call the um, uh, sort of level one way to do it, is to, let's just write some Terraform
Just write
scripts.
some, yeah, just
Yeah.
write some scripts. So
Yeah.
just in case people who are listening in, if you've never not heard of Terraform before,
Oh,
it's
yes. Yeah.
it's an infrastructure as code way of doing things. So as in, rather than me and you going into a cloud provider and clicking around and creating stuff, we can write that in code. And the point about using it in code is it's repeatable. The same script I run it can deploy things correctly. And yeah, and basically what we're going to do is, instead of, you can write your own scripts, but if you write your own scripts, you have to maintain them. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And that is something that you're, you know, everybody's thrilled on the day one process of getting those scripts off the ground and getting them running. That's really wonderful. The day two problem is what people don't think about, which is maintenance and, you know, version changes and those kinds of things. And that's a long-term commitment, as I said. So you have to be absolutely aware of that. Now, that's, like I said, that's the sort of layer one. By the way, thank you for telling the world about Terraform. I just sort of assumed everybody, you know, but thank you for level setting on that. There are other tools too, but Terraform is the one that's generic and works across all those platform providers that we talked about. The next step, another approach in the automation umbrella, is to buy a tool or buy capabilities. And that's where I will toot our own horn, which is to say that's what Appvia offers, is the ability to, off the shelf, offer these kinds of capabilities. And you do not have to be a developer in order to run these things. And you have, and by the way, unlike Terraform or other scripting tools, the support process isn't really there for them. You have to get on different message boards and ask questions if something blows up, and they'll say, well, that's too bad, but why don't you try this? There's no formalized support process unless you pay a lot of money for Terraform. On the other hand, if you have a prepackaged arrangement like you have with the Appvia tools, then you actually have somebody to call and say, I have a problem, could you help me with that? And enterprises particularly like that. Nobody likes the idea, if you're sitting by, some VP sitting behind the desk says, how come such and such broke last night and we couldn't bring up Terraform? And the guy goes, I put a message on the message board and I'm hoping to get an answer any minute. That doesn't go too far. I've lost you, Salman. No, can't hear you. Can't hear you, dude. Can't hear you. No, don't hear nothing. Oh, that sounds better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know.
There's always at least one technical glitch in every webinar.
But you can hear me now, right?
I can hear you just fine.
All right,
I can hear you just fine.
So basically, what we're saying so far, what I was saying, while you couldn't hear me, I'm sure people can. If you can't hear us, please let us know. But so what I was going to summarize what we were saying is, if you use any of these tools, you can automate stuff. Of course, you can use Terraform, you can use Pulumi, anything you like. If you use any of these tools, first you need to have the knowledge of the cloud provider that you're using.
Yes, sir.
GCP, whichever you're using, and then you have to look after the scripts that you wrote.
Yes,
that's quite a lot, right? So first, I need to be an expert in the cloud provider, and then I also need to look after the scripts. And I've written those scripts myself, and sometimes they get out of hand. I'm not going to say all the time, but sometimes they get out of hand. And it does happen. You can end up in a bit of a messy situation. And so the thing is, instead of you going through all this pain, you can lean on upon Appvia folks. We've got some
Yeah.
tools that let you do this.
No,
Correct,
and
right?
that's an excellent point. That the when you write a script for GCP
Yeah,
and you write a script for AWS and you write a script for Azure,
yeah,
that might very well be three separate people
yeah,
because they require three separate sets of understanding. Now, sometimes you'll get somebody who is a
yeah.
true polymath and they can understand all the different providers just fine, and they'll
Right.
write scripts for it. But often it'll be different people. So you have a multiplicity of people,
Yeah.
and you also have the other issue which I was talking about, which is somebody to call. Who are you going to call when it breaks? Well, my
Hmm.
GCP Terraform script blew up. Well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Um, so support's an issue.
No,
Um,
that's cool. Because another, I'm guessing another thing is when you write your infrastructure code, it
mhm.
could be code, right? You can create your things. For example, you can create buckets where you store your files in, and you can create clusters which are open to the world. And you might not be aware of the security loopholes that you might have left. Like I've done that. I've left some things
Oh
open
yeah.
which shouldn't be open.
Oh
And
yeah.
somebody's come to me and said, "Well, we did a scan and we found out you've got some stuff open. You need to sort this out." And of course, there's just so much for us to pick, right? And then that becomes also a problem, and things keep changing too, and you have to keep on top of what's changed. All the APIs keep deprecating. You have to keep making changes. Everything becomes new, and just a lot to take in, right?
No, it's an awful lot to take in. I mean, you make an excellent point, which is just because you can write a script to bring up write a Terraform script to bring up a Kubernetes cluster, has nothing to do with whether or not that cluster is secure and built
Correct.
according to best practices.
Yeah.
As a friend of mine used to say, Terraform and these other scripting technologies like CloudFormation, they are
Hmm.
a thinking professional's tool.
That's
you,
true. That's true.
you really need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. No. No.
um,
No.
and
That's fair.
and going with the other approach, like I was mentioning, which with in this case Appvia, the day two operational concerns are baked in, so
Hmm.
that you
Hmm.
don't inadvertently, or at least not easily inadvertently, do something dumb with your security, so that
Correct.
you build things that are insecure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, or unsecure. I always get those two
Insecure.
words. Yeah, I don't
Unsecure.
know
I
what.
don't know.
Yeah,
I think we all know what we're talking about.
yeah,
Not
exactly.
secure. Not secure. That's what we're
Yeah,
talking
not
about.
secure. Thank you. That's a
Yeah.
better way
Yeah.
to put it.
No. No.
Um,
No, that
so
makes sense, right? So this is what the DevSecOps what started is saying move
yes,
shift security to left. So bring it before, like sometimes like back in the days, I'm gonna say back in the days, security perhaps used to be afterthought. Everything's been created and you're like,
yes,
we need to make it secure. But now we're saying with Appia, how we do stuff from the get-go, we put in all those good practices of security, development cycle, life cycles. Everything is there from to start with, and that's what we do. Correct?
yeah. It's really expertise in a box. It's we have the battle scars from doing dumb things.
Yeah.
And or at least in my case, I can't speak for everybody else. And then having done those things that you regret, you encased or ensconced those best practices in code, so that nobody else does it.
Yeah.
So that's the approach that we take, is to be secure. Now, it's one of the things that's nice about that approach is what you do is you would define a user ID,
Hmm.
and that user ID inherits all these security hooks, and as
Right.
a consequence, you don't have to worry about the individual security changes that you would
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
make.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fair enough. I think. Well, if people are interested, head over to appvia.io. You can find us on Twitter, or we can give our credentials in the end. You can always message
Yes,
us, and
yes.
we can have a chat. But let me just welcome if you're joining in. Now we are talking about business scalability, and one of the big issues that we face, what that we work with our clients that we see is technology wise people can scale up, and what then tends to happen is the business scalability. How do we onboard people? How do we make sure people get their resources allocated to them correctly, and that onboarding users doesn't become a bottleneck. Users as in like developers and people who need to use those resources. And the way not to do it is by throwing more people at it and keep doing the stuff manually. And as Tennis was explaining, you can automate that stuff. You can automate using any scripting language or any script. You can write a bunch of scripts, but sometimes you have to, of course, maintain them and keep on top of it. But it's probably better to, maybe invest in a tool that does it out of the box. And we've got those expertise. And if you're interested, check out our website, appvia.io. We have some fantastic tools there. We've got all great people in there that we can help out. We got a few more minutes. Like I'm going to say about 4 minutes before we jump into questions. We got a few questions, Tennis, some hard ones. So be prepared, please.
Okay.
But before, I think it's important, Tennis, to, in my opinion, like this is my opinion, because I work as a developer, person who creates stuff. This feeling of empowerment that I can join an organization tomorrow and start building things and start deploying things to production where people can start using it. I think that's very important to give into the hands of developers, support people, SRE people, whoever they might be. Would you agree with that? Do you think
Absolutely.
is that where we're trying to get to?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really excellent point. The intent behind the Appvia approach is to stand the paradigm on its head. Instead of going and saying, please, sir, may I have a cluster? And the guy goes, just fill out a form. And you send a form off into the ether and somebody reviews it and approves it. And then a DevOps guy is assigned to it. And that DevOps person goes, okay, I'm going to build a cluster. I'll get back to you after lunch, and by the end of the week it's built. Okay. And then you eventually get another message out of the ether that says your cluster is stood up. Then you try to log in and you can't because they forgot to tell you about some credential. And so that's the old sort of way of doing it. Well, the Appvia way is upside down on purpose, which is we pre-create the permissions and we set up a user ID for you based on the administrator will set up the ID. And then you decide when you want the cluster and you bring up the cluster and immediately you're off and running. Salman, I'm sure you've gone through this with other organizations that, I'm a brand new developer and I'm here to develop. And it takes about a week to get an environment. Yeah, I know, let's be conservative and say it takes like a week to get an environment where you can actually start developing. And the Appvia approach is very different. It's upside down, which is you drive the effort to create the environment on which you want to do the development. And that's the intent. Yeah.
So basically, we want to accelerate that process. Well, business scalability, right? Process scalability. That's what we're trying to get to. So
exactly.
You're not there sitting around trying to figure out what to do and waiting for permissions and all this sort of stuff. And it doesn't just have to be Kubernetes, right? Tennis.
No.
We've got other expertise too. Anything to do with cloud native, we're the people to talk to.
Kubernetes is just a convenient.
It's just
it's a convenient, and it's a hot topic, so it's well worth discussing.
So you do mention, Tennis, that we shouldn't hire people and automate, right? So let me just summarize. Well, you've scaled up your business, technology is scaled up, and you need to create more resources because you've got more people joining your organization. And instead of manually creating them, you automate them. Don't hire, people to solve the problem. You automate all these issues, and you can go up to an extent where you can keep automating stuff, keep writing scripts, but then you have to look after them, you have to maintain them, you have to make sure what you've implemented follows best practices. You have to go through all the documentation of everything, and things change, you have to update them, or you can, speak to Appvia, and we've got some tools that help you. So there's a question that I think is a very good question that's come in. And I'm going to ask you that is, Tennis, you keep saying we should not hire more people to solve this problem. When do you need to hire more people? That's the question.
Good question. It's a good question. Yeah. You need to hire people to do the automation. You don't need to hire people to do the manual stuff. So if things are piling up and you're getting complaints, you got at least two options. Right. You hire somebody or several somebodies to do the automation for your own scripting effort.
Okay.
Or you start talking to Appvia and installing Appvia
Okay.
But the bottom line is not to throw bodies at a near-term fix. You want to throw
Hmm.
your effort behind something that is a permanent fix.
Okay.
And that's and I guess it boils down to when you start hearing complaints, when you start
Hmm.
well, hopefully you can end run that a little bit by anticipating it. You know,
Hmm.
if it's clear that your queue last week was 2 requests and your folks had no trouble dealing with it, and you realize that in 6 weeks it's going to be a queue depth of 8 or 10 or 15 or 20 or maybe 50 or 60, that's
Yeah.
when you should start thinking about maybe I need to hire automators instead
Yeah.
of implementers.
Yeah.
And you know, that is not a trivial effort by itself to
Yeah.
hire the right people, but that's the message that you should listen to when you start seeing the queue depth increase.
Okay, so when the queue depth starts to increase and the manual effort can't keep up, you should hire people
Yeah,
to automate that stuff rather than trying to keep doing them, assign
yeah,
them to manual stuff.
yeah.
So
You should. I mean,
this,
yeah. The manual process should be a stopgap at best.
hmm.
Anyway,
Hmm.
you realize when you sign up for one of the things we haven't really talked about, but is that if you come from a highly bureaucratic environment where there's
Yeah.
this multiple stage vetting process and permission garnering process in order to get something done,
Yeah.
and you sort of weld that on top of the cloud effort, that doesn't really work too well.
Right. Okay.
You've slowed down your cloud effort by doing that. So you really need to reevaluate how you want to get things
Yeah.
done.
That's fair enough.
And the fact that you're still doing things manually is just an indicator of that overall uh, effort that you need to think about.
Okay. So I think that sounds like a good answer there, which leads very well into the next question. And the
Sure.
question is, it's actually a very good question. It says cloud engineers know that they know what kind of metrics they need to collect in order to scale their services, right? So how many people are visiting their application and they can scale up. But what metrics does the organization need to collect in order to assess if they have to scale their business, the process that we're talking about?
Well, I
Okay.
sort of answered that in the
Kind
first
of, yeah.
question, which is, and it's still a good question, which is it's the number of requests that are coming in,
Yeah.
and the crystal ball gazing you'll have to do is, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
it's 1 or 2 this week, but it's going to be a lot more in 6 weeks or
Yeah.
8 weeks or whatever the number would be. That's the kind of metric. It's and that's part of the DevOps ideal, is to talk to your customers and know what their requirements are.
Hmm.
If you are in a large, rather siloed environment, then you may see it in the form of tickets that are coming in.
Yeah.
But if you're in a small environment where your people talk to each other and you get Slack messages, you
Hmm.
know, you just have to understand that, oh wow, this is success. When people say this cloud thing you're doing is really awesome, you should hear alarm bell. When you're sitting, you can't sit on your laurels. You have to,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm going to have to start worrying about scaling
Fair
this.
enough. Yeah. So I'm guessing when you scale up, you perhaps also want to collect metrics on how long does it take for me to
Yes.
complete my tickets, right? How long does
Yes.
it take for a developer to get onboarded so they can deploy some stuff
That's right.
into production, right? So
No,
I'm guessing,
those are good measures. Yeah.
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 So some metrics around those. So anything to do with, if you can collect that, and as you say, we can grab that from the tickets that were raised and how long how long it took for us for that ticket to be open. Like we can figure out,
Yeah.
and those metrics. It doesn't have to be a fancy Grafana or Prometheus, right? You
No,
can
no,
just
no. It's
grab it
just,
from your tickets and get that, make a
yeah.
dashboard and pull it.
You
So,
you could do,
oh,
you could do it with just scanning through your chat history on
yeah.
Slack, and oh look, the guy asked for it last week and it hasn't been done yet. That kind of
Correct.
thing.
Yeah. So I think that hopefully answers that question quite well. We got a couple more tennis for you,
Sure.
and so the next one is when it comes to tools, is it worth thinking long term before you adopt them? Should you think about the scalability of your tooling, or wait till you actually face the need? So I think that's a
Hope.
good question.
Yeah, I think the earlier the better.
Hmm.
the unfortunately, most of the time, and this is human nature. It's when pain is in your life that you take the time to deal with the pain. But as I was saying, as your organization grows, hopefully because of its success, then really early on, you should start to think about, how am I going to grow this? And if so, what tack am I going to take to address this? And so I guess the short answer to that question is, the earlier the better. Get your head above the fray long enough to realize that we're going down the path of this cloud thing. Everybody likes it. Everybody wants it. It is absolutely not going to get less in its demand. It's going to get greater in its demand, and we need to be tooling up to handle that.
Yeah, so basically a bit of forward thinking into like what you need to do. And I think like sometimes, Tennis, I see this, people perhaps ponder too much on what kind of tools they should use, right? And if you're months down the line and you still haven't decided what tools you're using, maybe at that point you should just start, right? We'll go with this, and then we can take stock. I think it's important to take stock perhaps every few weeks to figure out, is this tool giving us what we wanted? And not be this is, I mean, it works best when you're not scared of pivoting and saying, oh, this thing failed, let's start again, let's do something new. And sometimes, of course, you can't do it, but don't be scared of changing things halfway through.
And going back to the Terraform example, if you're a small shop and you've got just a few people, and you're growing, you'll grow to a whopping 10 people in a couple of years, then Terraform will be fine. But if you're an enterprise and you're going to be drinking from a fire hose, you're going to have to think about how that organization is going to scale to meet that need. And that's the sort of situation where Appvia is a good answer. Anyway, that's
fair enough. I think this is good. Let's do one last question.
Okay.
Tennis, I know you're quite busy. You've got some sword practice coming up and some other problems, scalability problems to solve. But let me give you the last question there. Are there any resources, things like books, blogs, podcasts that can discuss the scalability issues and then perhaps can point people in the right direction? Any suggestions from your side?
To be honest with you, I don't know of anywhere other than you and I talking now, and the blog post that we did, and it wasn't just me; it's got my name on it, but it was it's an effort among a lot of people to talk about this. Other than that, it doesn't seem to be a topic that is covered a great deal. I mean, and maybe I'm just talking out of sheer ignorance. If somebody wants to chime in and leave a comment that says otherwise, but we get, and this is a human thing, we get so enamored with the shiny thing that is the cloud, that we don't think about the personnel implications, the process implications, as much. So the short answer to that question is, I don't know of any. But well, I'm happy to be wrong on that point.
No, I mean there's some bits you can perhaps. There's some bits, not all of it, and I think it's a very valid point that you make, Tennis, that people you just talk about like technology problems and the process change. I think you can get bits of it from the Phoenix Project book, the classic Phoenix Project.
Great
I think
book.
That's a good book. I think there's some bits of it inside, like in terms of processes. Well, there's another podcast from Appia. If you just search for Appia podcast, and we got a few episodes out already. Sometimes it is a topic of discussions as to why some of the projects failed, and the answer is the processes were in place. So I think if people are interested, you can follow us along on the webinars, and we can do it. Anything else you wanted to add? Maybe I can do a quick summary, and we can end there. Anything, Tennis, you want to add that we haven't talked about?
Okay, no, sir.
Cool. So, thank you all very much for joining the webinar. So the key takeaway is that when you move in from when you're new into the cloud and everything is working great, you can scale out technically correctly. You should pay attention to your processes, your business processes. How are people getting onboarded? How you're creating things at scale? And if you're still doing things manually, perhaps think about doing it in an automated fashion. Use infrastructure as code or anything you like, but then you have to, of course, look after them and implement the best practices, the security practices, or you can speak to us, Appvia. Check us out, appvia.io. We've got lots of tools, lots of people, lots of discussions. We'll be doing more of these, so let us know anything you like. You can find me on Twitter as Soulman Iqbal, because I couldn't get Salman Iqbal. So Soulman, SOULMAN Iqbal. I tweet about tech stuff at times, and I also have a YouTube video which you can check out. I make some Kubernetes videos with the same name, Soulman Iqbal. So you know what to say, Tennis, like and subscribe. Yeah, feel free to drop a message and you can talk to us. Tennis, would you like to share where people can find you?
Oh, I'm just tennis.smith@appia.io.
Oh yeah, same here, Salman.Iqbal@Appvia.io. So please drop in any questions that you have, anything you want to discuss scalability, technology-wise, and we will be very happy to answer your questions. We've got, I'm just going to put the slide up. So I think that's done there. So thank you all very much for joining, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, Tennis. It was a very insightful discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.